So complex numbers. شو هو complex number? We usually see it as I or J. You can use either I or J. And what does it mean? All it basically means that these are both are equal to square root of minus 1. احنا عادة when we do square root of minus 1 in a calculator يعطينا math error or undefined or whatever. بس in the real world applications, we have defined these numbers as complex numbers. Anything under the square root that is negative, that is a complex number. That is what it is. So basically, you can use the symbol I or the symbol J to represent it. I usually use the symbol J because I don't like the symbol I. People mistake it for the number 1 sometimes or whatever. So I usually prefer to use the symbol J. Okay, so if you see I or J, they both mean the square root of minus 1. Usually a complex number, if you remember, it has two components to it. A complex number. It has, let's call it Z. So a complex number will have a real part, for example, 5 plus J. Okay, so or plus 2J. So this will have a real part to it. This is the real part. And this is the imaginary part. Okay, imaginary part. This is what a complex number basically is. That's it. This is the whole idea of a complex number. You remember you can add them, you can multiply them, different types. It could be minus, plus, all of that. So let's go into first solving some basic complex number equations. So remember that J is equal to square root of minus 1. So and then a J squared, what does that mean? It's square root of minus 1 squared. Or in other words, J squared is simply just equal to minus 1. J squared. So J squared becomes a real number. Yani when you square J, you're going to get a real number at the end. So let's say we have J to the power of 23. Insane. Remember your exponential rules. This is the same as saying it's equal to J to the power of 1 times J to the power of 22. Then you're just adding 1 plus 2. 1 plus 22. صح ولا لا? And you just multiply in between. When you multiply here, this is the same as saying you're adding the powers. So J to the power 22, if we simplify it even more, so this is just J times J to the power 22 is J to the power of 2 times 11. In other words, this is J times J to the J squared to the power of 11. صح ولا لا? And again, if you remember, we covered this topic before in exponentials. This means 2 times 11 when you have a power to the power. So J times 2 times 11 is going to be written as J squared to the power of 11. Why do we do it in this way? Because this now we can simplify and make it as J times, what's J squared? We already know that J squared is equal to minus 1. So minus 1 to the power of 11. Now, minus 1, in general, a negative number. If it's to the power of an odd number, let's say 1, it is going to stay negative. If it is to the power of odd, if it is power to an even number like 2, it is going to become positive. 11 is an odd number. فالجواب بيكون J times minus 1, or in other words, minus J. So J to the power of 23 is equal to minus J. Okay, this is how you basically do mathematical simplification of J. When you see J, if you see it has a power, this is how you simplify the power of J, of the imaginary part. Okay, let's say we have another equation like minus 4 over J to the power of 9. Come on. Let's look at just the J part and then we'll come back to everything else. So it's J to the power of 9 is the same as saying J times J to the power of 8. الفكرة, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to turn this into an even number which is divisible by 2. Same thing here. This was 23. I changed it into 22 so I can divide it by 2. عشان I can rewrite it as this J times j to the power of 2 to the power of 4. Then the 8 is 2 times 4. Tamam? That's the whole concept of what I'm trying to do. If we simplify this more, this is going to be j times minus 1 to the power of 4. 4 is even. So it's going to be j times positive 1. In other words, it's equal to just j. So what did we find out? That minus 4 over j9 is simply equal to minus 4 over j. Then this is equal to j to the power of 9. This whole thing, we are just calculating j to the power of 9. صح ولا لا? Usually in equations with involving j, we do not want the j to be in the denominator. We always move the j up to the numerator. There's a shortcut to this, but the way it is done is we will multiply up and down. We will multiply it by minus j. Or you could just multiply it by j as well. It's the same thing. Okay? The reason we are doing this is j over j is 1, so we're basically multiplying this by 1. But what do we know? This will give us minus 4j over j squared. We already know j squared is equal to what? What is j squared equal to? It's equal to minus 1. صح ولا لا? J squared is equal to minus 1. لأن j, again, keep in mind, j, all it means is it's the square root of minus 1. So j squared is going to be equal to minus 1. That's it. We can just rewrite this as minus 4j over j squared is over minus 1. Minus and minus will cancel. So simply, this is equal to just 4j, or sometimes they write it as j4. Okay, it's just a notation. يعني حطوا j قبل 4. Sometimes they put the 4 before the j. It depends. You will see يعني if you take if you're going into electrical or electromechanical, you will use j4 a lot more often. يعني this is how you guys usually do it in circuits and stuff. You write it in this form. In mechanical engineering, you rarely even see this, but when you do see it, usually they write it in this way. Okay. Now, what did we deduce from this? عرفنا إن شوفوا minus 4 over j to the power of 9 is simply equal to 4j. So you can always find out if you have a j to the power. This is power 9, okay? A j to the power, you can always simplify it to a single j. And you can always have the j in the numerator no matter the condition. يعني you can always eliminate the j in the denominators, which we'll reach in the next concept, which is you most of the time using a complex conjugate. So if you remember from MATLAB, if we had something like 5 plus 3j, what is the complex conjugate of this? Complex conjugate. What is it equal to? It's equal to 5 minus 3j. So we are just going to flip the sign of the imaginary number, just the imaginary number, which is 3j in this case. This is called the complex conjugate of the equation. If you multiply 5 plus 3j, okay? If you multiply a number with its complex conjugate, a complex number, if you multiply it with its complex conjugate, let's see what happens. So let's distribute, simple multiplication. Distribute these. So 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times minus 3j is minus 15j. 3j times 5 is plus 15j. Minus 3j times plus 3j becomes minus 3j squared. لو تلاحظون, the middle part, it becomes 0, minus 15 plus 15. So this becomes plus 0. زين. And this is minus 3. What is j squared? It is minus 1. Minus 1. Oh, this is 9j, not 3j. It's 3j times 3j, which becomes 9j. 9j squared. Okay? 9j, sorry about that. 9j. J squared becomes minus 1. When it becomes minus 1, it's becoming a real number now. You notice that there's not a single j in our equation. So we are left with 25. The minus and the minus becomes plus 9. So what did we deduce from this? If we multiply a number with its complex conjugate, يعني احنا we took this number and we multiplied it by its complex conjugate, the answer is going to be 5 squared plus 3 squared. Because 5 squared is 25 and 3 squared is 9. And that's the main concept of understanding. Yani this is what you need to know. What you need to know is if you multiply this with its complex conjugate, your answer is just going to be 5 squared plus 3 squared. You don't have to go through all of this shenanigans. يعني ما لازم تروحون تحلون وتسوون distribution. This is the whole point of this. Same thing مع opposite values. يعني if you have 3 minus مثلا 2j, you have, what's the complex conjugate here? The conjugate is equal to 3 plus 2j. Directly, I can tell you if you multiply these two, it's going to be 3 squared plus 2 squared, which is equal to 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 times 2, which is 4, equal to 9, 13. Okay? This is an important concept. Where are you going to use this most of the time? If you have, for example, 5j over مثلا 3 minus 2j, you want to multiply up and down with the complex conjugate so you can eliminate an imaginary number in the denominator. So you find the complex conjugate of 3 minus 2j, في هالحالة 3 plus 2j, up and down. اللي هني these two denominators زين فالنumerator it will become 5j into 3 plus 2j. The denominator directly you know it's going to be 3 squared plus 2 squared, and that's it. Batul, you are kind of correct with that equation, but keep in mind we have a j, that's why it becomes from minus to plus, because our b squared in this case is going to have a j which is a negative number when it's squared. Then a j squared gives you a minus 1. So minus 1 will become multiplied by the minus b in your equation, that's why it becomes a plus b. That's the difference. But that's exactly where it comes from. That's exactly how you solve it. You are 100% correct. انزين. What else do we need to know? Addition and subtraction is very simple. إذا عندكم 5j 5 plus 2j زين or you want to add this to 3 minus 1j or just j, you will add the real parts together and the imaginary parts together, and that's it. So simply بيكون عندنا 5 plus 3 plus 2j minus j. Then minus 1j هني. Plus minus becomes minus. That's it. Same thing with subtraction. Just make sure you're distributing. You're just going to directly add them and just add the real and real numbers together and add the imaginary numbers together. So the imaginary numbers you're going to add by themselves and the real numbers you're going to add by themselves. Real. Okay, very simple. Same thing with subtraction. Same thing with addition. But when it comes to multiplication, it's just its distribution. فعندنا عندكم 5 plus 3j times 2 minus 2j. Distribute, 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 and solve the equation, and you're done. Literally, and you're done. Okay? That's how you do arithmetic operations. Multiplication, division, subtraction, all of that. Tamam? What else is there? Division, there is a trick to it. إذا عندنا مثلا 5 plus 3j divided by 2 minus 2j. زين. The trick here is to simplify it and remove the j's from the denominator. So what can you do here? You can just simply multiply by the complex conjugate of the denominator عشان you simplify the division. So it's going to be 2 plus 2j نفس ما سوينا قبل و 2 plus 2j. Why do we do this? عشان في النهاية النيومريتور only has شو يسمونه complex number أو imaginary part of the number. With denominator it will not have any imaginary numbers, which because of the concept we just explained, which is complex conjugate. So in the terms of division, always try to find the complex conjugate and multiply up and down by it, so you can simplify وبعدين distribution on the top, and it's very simple to simplify that. تمام. If you remember from MATLAB, again, graphing. Graphing of complex numbers. So let's say we have a complex equation of 5 minus 3j. And then this is our real axis, and this is our imaginary axis. So this is the imaginary number, minus 3, and plus 5 is our real number. So we go to the real axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus 5. This is our 5. We go to our imaginary axis, it's minus, so minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. This is minus 3. Our point is simply here, and this is how you draw a line from the, you draw a line from the center of the graph up to that point, and that is your vector, or your vector in your graph of your complex number, and that's it. That's how you draw it. Now, one thing you need to note here, this is also how you can determine your polar function that you need to understand also, which we will get to in a bit. So the polar function is, before that, this is called an Argand diagram. I don't know if you know that, but it's called an Argand diagram. Then you will use this diagram a lot in the future in في كل تخصصاتكم, in all of engineering. You're going to use this, especially with complex numbers, imaginary versus real. So you have to understand very well how you can use your rectangular, how you can plot your rectangular points, how you can determine your polar from this function as well. So how do we find out the polar value? The polar value, so this is called rectangular form right now. This is what we're dealing with. This is called rectangular form, or rectangular or Cartesian form, right? Or Cartesian coordinates. In polar form, you're going to have a magnitude. Let's call it R, and I'll tell you why. You're going to have a magnitude, so Z, the same Z is equal to R with a angle theta. This is called polar form. Okay, so the rectangular form is basically because you see you make a rectangle here, a rectangle, you minus 3 or 5. Literally, that's where the name comes from. تشوفون axis, it makes a rectangle with the coordinates, hence why they call it a rectangular, or the more appropriate term, Cartesian coordinates. هني the polar form, we are gonna have a radius r, or a magnitude r, I should say, with an angle. Where's the radius r? The radius r is this blue line over here. That's your radius r. And your angle theta is over here. That's your angle theta. Okay? Actually, the angle theta is not this one. The angle theta is going to be this angle over here. This is your angle theta for this case. Okay? So your angle will depend on where the location of your point is. If it's in the fourth quadrant, just some terminology, this is called the first quadrant, this is the second quadrant, this is the third quadrant, and this is the fourth quadrant. Okay? So in the graph, when it's in the fourth quadrant, you're always starting from the positive x-axis, or in this case, the positive real axis. That's where your angle will always start from. Okay? To find your angle, first let's find r. How do you find r? Simple. Pythagoras theorem, r squared is equal to a squared plus b squared, or real squared, plus imaginary squared. Then we have a triangle here. So this is a triangle. the height of 5 and the width or the base of 3, all right, or the base of 5 and the height of 3 minus 3, all right. So r squared is going to be equal to, or just simply r is going to be equal to the square root of your real squared, in this case it's 5 squared, plus your imaginary squared, which is minus 3 squared, which is equal to, remember to put parentheses or brackets so you can, when you calculate this, so this is equal to the square root of 5 is 25 plus 9 square root of 34, which is roughly square root of 34 تقريبا 5.8, 5.83. Okay, so this is the value of your magnitude, the first part, the r in polar form. Excuse me. The second part is finding your theta. Theta is equal to the tan inverse of the opposite, imaginary part, over L opposite over adjacent over the real part. Keep in mind, this theta I am talking about is actually not this. We are talking about this value now. This theta that we are getting out. Okay? You need to logically look at it to figure out from the x-axis what the actual value of theta is, and we will see that in practice الحين. But tan inverse of imaginary over real, or in this case it's equal to the tan inverse of, with the sign, imaginary is minus 3 over real is 5. Tan inverse of 3 over 5, or minus 3 over 5, you're going to get a negative value of minus 30.96. Why is it negative? I will say because we have a negative inside, and tan, if it's negative, the value will also become negative. زين? The minus theta هني, the reason it's minus because I told you the angle starts from this axis. So if you notice that this angle, it is going in the opposite direction. فبما معناه they are saying it's not, يعني, the notation of it is just saying it's 30 degrees, not in the positive direction, because this is the positive direction. So it's saying, no, it's in the negative direction. It's going 30 degrees in the negative direction. That's all this is saying. So it's minus 30.96, يعني 30 degrees in the opposite direction. So you can either write this as minus 30.96, or you can add 360 to it so you can get this value over here. Again, this is correct if you just write it directly here. There's nothing wrong with this. يعني الحين الانسر مالنا is Z is equal to R, which is 5.83, angle minus 30.96. This is 100% correct. Okay? But don't worry about the calculation wise. This is correct if you use this. The reason I'm trying to inform you about this is because this is a standardized notation in engineering بشكل عام. And usually when we look at an angle in a graph, we look at it from the positive x-axis up to that angle. This is what we usually use or refer to as an angle. However, you can put this in calculations. In calculations, you can use this number and it will be correct. تمام? When it comes to your course, يعني math for engineers, I'm not sure what they exactly want. I don't know how detailed they want the angle to be and the notation وكل هالسوالف. But this is basically how it usually is. تمام? Let me just check your slides to see how they represent angles in general. دقيقة, someone said, is it correct whenever it says on the second quadrant, it's 180 minus theta? زين, okay, that's right. زين. The third quadrant, 180 plus theta. Yep, صح. Fourth quadrant, it's minus theta. Yes, You are correct. Second quadrant, it's always 180 minus theta. Third quadrant, it's 180 plus theta. Fourth quadrant, it's minus theta. You can use that as a rule of thumb to always have the direction from the positive x. Yes, you are correct. لأن أنا مو حافظنهم كذي. And I just usually do it, you know, I look at it, okay, I have to do that. I don't have like an equation in mind when I solve this. But let me just see how they want you to express this real quick. Again, I don't see any information about this, but my recommendation, in this case, because it's negative, I would convert it into the positive value, which is 5.83 angle minus 30.96 plus 360. So in the fourth quadrant, it's, you could say 360 plus theta. لأن why is it 360 plus theta? A full circle is 360. Theta, if it's below in the fourth quadrant, it's going to give a negative number. So it's going to be negative, for example, for 20. Then, so when you add the 360, it's basically as if you're saying it's 360 minus this part. The initial hell part, the remaining part is only going to be from the x up to here. That's why you can just simply say it's minus 20 plus 360. So if you want, I mean, that's a good rule of thumb. If it's in the first quadrant, theta equal theta, صح. If it's in the second quadrant, theta is equal to, أو بنقول الانجل أحسن عشان ينفهم. Angle is equal to theta. Angle is equal to theta, or 180 minus theta. 180 minus theta. In the third quadrant, it's always going to be 180 plus theta. Be careful with this. Be very careful with this. Then I'll tell you why in a bit. Let me just finish the rules. And then in the last one, it's 360. Angle is 360 plus theta. The reason I'm saying to be careful with this is because the theta is actually... No, okay, it's fine. Yeah, this is going to be theta. Yeah, you're right. You're correct. It's okay. Correct. And this is going to be 360 plus theta. That's it. Okay. طبعا when I say theta, I'm saying include the sign. يعني هني in this case, it should be minus theta at the theta positive ماخذينه. For example, here it's minus 30.96 because the minus represents direction. مو بالvalue مال theta. The value of just theta is 30 degrees. يعني إذا تشوفون هاي الvalue, it's 30 degrees. But the direction is minus and it's going in the negative direction. So keep that in mind. If you're taking only theta without the direction, it is going to be minus. If you're taking it with the direction, it's going to be plus. So keep that in mind, okay? So basically, this is how it's going to look like. And then the theta is going to be here. Theta is going to be here. And the theta is going to be here. Okay? If you want a way to not confuse yourselves, with these rules and all of this, just understand where the theta location is, understand that this is all the direction you need to go to, and just subtract the line or the circle depending on that. The other way is not to put a sign here, not to put a negative sign, I mean هني في التان, and then locating it on the graph and then using these formulas, it will always work. Okay? That is another way. So you could use this as a rule of thumb. So in this case, our last z is going to be equal to 5.83 angle 360 minus 30.96. It's just going to be تقريبا, so 329.04. Okay, لا تصدعون روحكم وايد ويا هاي المعلومات انه what if it becomes here, up, down, left, right. if you are too confused, حتى if you will lose marks on it, just keep it in the negative form when it comes to solving, because all your numbers will be the same exact thing. Okay? And I doubt they will really test you about the quadrants thing. I'm not sure exactly how the exam will be. I don't think in the mock test كان في شيء يخص quadrants. But very important to note that this equations, you should know how to use these two equations, how to convert it into polar form. It's very straightforward. It's just basically the square root of the real squared plus imaginary squared with tan inverse of opposite over opposite adjacent, or in this case imaginary over real, and then you can just start solving. Okay. What is there? There was one rule also I need to try to remember. Multiplication and division. فالحين in polar form. We're talking about when you're in polar form. Let's say we have Z1 is equal to 5 angle 30 degrees. Z2 is equal to 3 angle 25 degrees. Okay? If you multiply Z1 times Z2, the first rule is the magnitudes you will multiply. So 5 times 3. Simple. The magnitudes you will multiply. The angles you will add. 30 degrees plus 25 degrees. Tamam? That's it. That's the whole rule. So theta's from positive x-axis and rotates anti-clockwise. You are correct, 100%. Yes. Always from the positive x-axis and rotates anti-clockwise. And then, so Z1 times Z2, you're going to multiply the magnitudes and you will add the angles. Okay? So the multiplication means addition for the angles. Same exact concepts if you remember in powers. يوم يكون عندكم exponent power الأس يكون 3 وضرب تسوونه كذي نفس الفكرة. Exactly the same thing. Here for the angles you will be, for the magnitude you are multiplying directly, but for the angles you will be adding. The exact same thing for division. Z1 divided by Z2 is going to be 5 divided by 3. The angle 30 degrees minus 25 degrees. Okay? You will be subtracting. And the last one is if you have a power. Let's say you have Z1 squared. Z1 is 5 angle 30. So yani 5 angle 30 all squared. You remember in power, what did we do with 2? So for 5, it's going to be 5 squared. For the angle, it's going to be multiplication. 2 times 30. The same as the exponents, if you remember, the laws of exponents. Same idea. 5 squared angle 2 times 30. Okay? That's how you do the power. What is the proof of this? If we do Z1 times Z1, isn't that Z squared? This is equal to 5 angle 30 times 5 angle 30. 5 times 5, magnitudes will be multiplied. Angles will be added. So it's 30 plus 30. Or in other words, it's 2 times 30. صح ولا لا؟ So this is, I think it's called the Moivre's theorem. ما أتذكر بالضبط. Yeah, and that's it. That's how you solve it. Very simple. Okay. So when it comes to addition, always convert it back into rectangular form. How do you convert from polar? So now we know from rectangle, quick recap, to polar. We have a Z is equal to A plus BJ. Z is equal to A plus BJ. الحين, how do we convert? R is going to be equal to A squared plus B squared under the square root. Theta is going to be equal to B tan inverse of B over A. This is how you convert from rectangular to polar. What do we want to convert from polar to rectangle? to rectangular. So you're given R is equal to a value. We have R, which we'll just call R by itself. Magnitude R, angle theta. Let's look at it graphically before we solve it. So graphically, we have an R. This is R. And we have an angle theta. Now, what do we want to find? This is our real. This is our imaginary. We are trying to find this value over here, this component. And we are trying to find the imaginary part, which is this component. What does this look like? A right triangle. So R, to find this, we want to find this. Let me نكبر التراينجل مثل ما يقولون. زين. إذا كبرنا التراينجل هني, this is our imaginary side. I'm just putting it on the right side. Okay. هذا هو لأن this length is equal to this length. It's equal to the same size. زين. This is our real side. The horizontal is always our real side and the vertical is our imaginary side. But let's call this our B and let's call this our A. And this is R. R is the hypotenuse. This is our theta. So what are the rules we know? We know that sine theta is equal to opposite, which is B over R. صح ولا لا? Over hypotenuse. B over R. And cosine theta is equal to A adjacent over hypotenuse. If we simplify these two equations, we find out that B is equal to R times sine theta, so R sine theta, and A is equal to R cosine theta. Remember that this is our real value and this is our imaginary value. And that's it. This is simply how it's done. So we are given R and theta. All we have to do is find our real and imaginary numbers by doing R sine theta for the imaginary and R cosine theta for the real. And that's the end of complex numbers. Any questions? So far, anything? I know it's to a confusion we are quadrants, okay? But again, like I explained earlier, the concept is you are taking it from the positive axis. Tan will always give you the direction. If you do it properly with the signs, it will give you the direction of where the theta is going. You have to understand what that direction means and solve it properly. Come on. So any questions? See what are some of the questions they have. These are all very straightforward, يعني. نشوف هذا. This one looks like good. This one looks good as well. Others are very straightforward. خلينا نسوي I و J بس عشان we do some examples at least. So it tells us to evaluate. We have I to the power of 203 plus I to the power of 12. Look at each one separately. For I times I to the power of 202 plus I12. Okay? We'll look at each one separately. Let's just focus on this part first. Let's focus on this part first. بعدين we will look at the other part. إنزين? So this is just this part. Okay? I times I 202 divided by 2 is equal to I squared divided by 101. I squared to the power of 101. 2 times 101 is 202. صح ولا لا? We know that 101, this is an odd number. So this is going to be -1. So this is going to be minus I. خلاص, and this is evaluated. The red part is evaluated. Now let's look at the green part. Yeah, it will all be recorded and on YouTube, Hussein. Salamat, ما تشوف شعر. Already it's even. It's divisible by 2. Okay, so we just say 2 times 6. I squared to the power 6. In other words, this is minus 1 to the power of 6. This is even. Even معناته this becomes 1. Literally I to the power of 12 means 1. تخيلوا. So this is the whole idea. So this gives us that we're done with the green part. So this is the green part and that's the red part. We put them back into the equation. This whole equation is going to be equal to minus I plus 1. And that's it. Or you can rewrite it as 1 minus I. Tamam? So this is how you evaluate I by itself if you have to solve a question like that. Let's look at this one. I plus 2I, 1 plus 2, and I'm going to convert them all to j لأن أنا صوتي راح وأنا أقول I. 3 plus 4j minus 2 minus 5j over minus j. Okay? How do we solve this? First step into solving any question like this, we want to simplify it in a way that we can solve it easily. In this case, the first step is we want to get rid of the denominator. How do we get rid of the denominator? Multiply both parts by their conjugates. So let's take it again separately, do each part by its own. I'll do this first and then I will do this one. Fa 1 plus, let's do it all in red. 1 plus 2j over 3 plus 4j times, what is the complex conjugate of the bottom number? It's just 3 minus 4j. Best, the sign of the imaginary number is going to change. And you have to multiply it up as well. So this is going to give us 1 plus 2j, 3 minus 4j, over 3 squared plus 4 squared. Distribute. 1 into 3 is 3. 1 into minus 4j is minus 4j. 2j into 3 is 6. 2 times 3, 6j plus 6j. 2j into minus 4j is 2 into minus 4 is minus 8. J squared all over 3 squared plus 4 squared is 3 squared is 9 and 4 squared is 16. Come on. 3 minus 4j plus 6j minus 8j squared. If we simplify this, finally we're going to get 3 minus 4j plus 6j is going to be plus 2j. 6j minus 4j is 2. Minus and minus becomes plus 8. What do I mean by minus and minus? J squared is minus 1. This is just minus 1. صح ولا لا? Minus 1 times 8 becomes this. 9 plus 16. Finally, what do we get? We get 3 plus 8, which is 11 plus 2j over 9 plus 16 is 25. And this is our first part. How do we simplified it? Let's do the same thing with the second part الحين. So we have 2 minus 5j over minus j. What's the complex conjugate of minus j? Plus j. Plus j. That's it. If you multiply j by minus j, what happens? It's very simple. You will just get 1, and I'll show you why. So 2 minus 5j times j over minus j times j is minus j squared. What does minus j squared mean? Minus j squared is minus 1. So 2 minus, let's just distribute the top part as well. So 2 into j, so that's 2j minus 5j squared over minus 1, which is simply just plus 1. So this is going to be 2j minus again, this becomes plus 5 لأن j squared is minus 1. زين ف 5 times minus 1 is plus 5. 5 times minus 1 is minus 5. Minus 5 times minus is plus. Let me do the steps so you guys don't get too confused. Insane. This is minus 5 times minus 1 over minus 1 times minus 1 is just 1. So we can simplify it finally to 2j. Minus and minus becomes plus 5. Now we just combine the green part and the red part. So it is 11 plus 2j over 25 plus, it was minus, sorry. في السؤال, this is from the question. The question says minus. So minus 2j plus 5. 2j plus 5. Keep it in brackets لأن you're going to have to distribute the minus. So this is going to be 11 plus 2j minus 2j plus 5 over 25. This is going to become minus as well. Then, how do you add these? You just have to find the common denominator. In other words, just multiply 25 up and down here as well. So multiply 25 divide by 25. So 11 plus 2j minus 2 times 25 is plus 5. خلينا نخليه كذي minus 25 times 2j is going to be 50j, and 25 times 5 is 125, صح? 125, yes, plus 125 divided by all 25. That's the whole idea. We did this so we can have a common denominator. فالحين we can simplify it even more. 11 plus 2j minus 50j plus 125. 11 plus 125 is 136 minus 48j over 25, and this is your final solution. طبعا you can simplify it more if you want. يعني تسوون 136 divided by 25 is going to give 5.44 minus 48 divided by 25 بيعطي 1.92 j. Okay, if you want to just divide the numbers by 25. And that's how you simplify this full big equation with j's into one that just has one real term and one imaginary term. Always you can simplify any complex number given, إن شاء الله مليون ألف j فيه. You can simplify it to a single real component and a single imaginary component. This is the whole idea. تمام? I think I will stop here. لأن الباقي it's just the questions, it's just you guys can practice them. There's so many different questions هني مثلا evaluate 1 minus I to the power of 5 and plot the result on an NN diagram. Same exact concept. زين عندكم I to the power of 5. You just have to formulate it. What else عندنا? Given Z1, Z2, determine that this multiplied وبعدين حطوه في الدايجرام. Multiply, division, divide, multiply 3 in a row. It's all the same thing. Addition. Show minus 25 over زين literally the exact same question I did. Solve the complex equations. Actually, let's do one of these. Solve the complex equations. هني قاعدين يقول لكم عندكم x و y. You need to find out what x and y is. Very simple. You just have to put x plus yi on one side by itself. So in this case, it's going to be 6 minus 3i divided by 2. So in other words, x plus yi is equal to 6 divided by 2 is 3 minus 3 divided by 2 is 1.5i. So your x value is going to be the real part, and the y value is going to be the imaginary part. And make sure you put the sign, يعني مع الماينس. Okay? And that's it. In any other question, if it's similar, this is what you're going to do. You're going to keep x and y on one side, and then you will keep, you will simplify, like I showed you earlier, you can simplify it to a single term all the time. You will simplify the other terms, and that's pretty much all you have to do. انزين شنو بعد عندنا؟ And they're giving you values, but they already gave you the equation. Plug in the values and solve. Express the following in polar form. You already know how to transform it into polar form. Evaluate the following into a plus bi. Yeah, you're converting to rectangular, and then you're going to do the evaluation. Determine in both polar and rectangular forms, just convert it into both forms. Solve the quadratic equation. Show the roots. Okay. I don't know if you guys remember quadratic equations. اصلا ما اعرف هني اذا سويتوه في الكالكوليتر بيطلع لكم. I'm not sure. Give me a second. Let me try this. 1 minus 2 5 بيطلع math error. لا والله يطلع لكم خلاص done. يطلع لكم x1 و x2. This is what I was trying to check. If you have the calculator, it will show you x1 and x2. It will be imaginary. But really quickly, I want to explain this concept, what it is. هني, if you remember the equation, it's minus b plus or minus square root 4b squared minus 4ac. Or AC, then over 2a. How does this become imaginary? إذا الروot تحته there was a negative number. So in this case, the b value مالنا is minus 2. So minus minus 2 becomes plus 2. Plus or minus square root. B squared is going to be 4. Minus 4 times 5 or times 1 times 5 over 2 times a, which is 1. Then for 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 times 5 is 20. 4 minus 20 is minus 16 over 2. And then minus 16 is simply the same as saying minus 2 plus or minus I or j square root of 16. It's the same thing. ليش؟ لأن j is square root minus 1 صح ولا لا؟ و 16 is it was as basically يعني minus 1 times 16. But it's the same thing as doing this. This is how this becomes into a complex form. So if you simplify this even more, it's going to be 2 plus or minus j4. The net square root of 16 is 4 over 2. Or in simpler terms, it's 1 plus or minus j2. فعندكم 1 plus j2, 1 minus j2. Okay, I just want to show this. Calculator will solve this instantly. You have to plot this. You know how to plot. You plot the real, you plot the imaginary, and that's it. Okay. Let's see the pics. Combine and determine the value and direction of the resultant force. It's very straightforward by drawing and by calculation. By drawing, I doubt it لأن لازم تحطون مسطرة ومسطرة. But by calculation, it's simply just using I just showed you on the how to find the components, X والY وكل هالسوالف and I don't even think you're gonna have to do this. This is mechanical question. Same thing with there was an electrical question I didn't even put here, number 18. I don't think that's gonna be there. لأن you need to actually do electrical fundamentals, which most of you have not done. Draw a neat sketch and determine the magnitude and direction of three resultant forces given the below when they act at a point. 10 newtons acting 45 degrees from the positive. Okay, they're acting all in the same point. This one we can actually do, and it's basic. And most of you said you enjoy mechanical, so we might as well do it. And then draw a neat sketch and determine the magnitude and direction of the resultant of the three coplanar forces. Coplanar meaning they're all on the same plane. يعني ما في Z direction. There's only X and Y. And then this is, by the way, not what you might call it. This isn't imaginary real. This is just basic graphing. فيعني عندنا احنا graph. زين. ايش صار؟ عندنا graph. Okay. And we will plot all of these points. فعندنا 10 newtons acting 45 degrees from the positive horizontal axis. 45 degrees تقريبا في النص. Let me color code all of these. 10 newtons يعني يقولوا تقريبا this is its size. Okay. And it's at a 45 degree. Okay. Let's say this is it. This is our first force A. Force B acting 120 degrees. So this is 90 plus 30 فهو 30 degrees هني. and it's 8 newtons فشوي أقصر من الثاني. This is B. Okay, this is 45 degrees. This is 30 degrees, or 120 from the positive x-axis. تمام. And آخر واحد for C, 50 newtons at 210 degrees. So this is 180 plus 30 هني. And this is the largest one, so let's make it a bit larger, something like this. And this is 30 degrees. لأن this is 180 plus 30, which is 210. Okay. And this is C. تمام. So what's the question? Determine the magnitude and direction of the resultant force. Super duper easy. Do not confuse yourself. وين بيكون شكله كيف step by step. Break all of these into their component parts. يعني put them all onto their axes. تتذكرون الpolar form كأنكم قاعدين تحولون polar form ل rectangular form. This is what you're doing right now. You're gonna make them all into polar or rectangular form. Okay? Like this. But let's start with A. Then let's start with A. A is equal to R value ماله 15 45 degrees. صح ولا لا؟ فتقدرون تقولون الريل أو يعني this is real لأن دائما نقول this is real and this is imaginary. زين عشان بس you can remember the same concept. زين الريل شنو كان؟ الريل is equal to فبنسميه AR. حق الريل بنحط R وحق الإيماجينري بنحط I. AR is equal to شو تتذكرون من الكونسبتس اللي تعلمناهم هني؟ الريل is equal to R cosine theta والإيماجينري is sine theta. الإيماجينري is on the y-axis, الريل is on the x-axis. ف R cosine theta. Now keep in mind, I have no idea if this will come in the exam, but it's a nice question, so I'm solving it. Keep in mind, theta هني, we are not talking about this angle, 30 degrees. For A, okay, صح. For A, we are talking about this angle. Here, we are talking about the other angle, and you need to understand that. You need to make sure you're taking the right angle. But for A, let's go step by step. For A, AR, it's going to be R cosine. For the real, it's going to be R, which is 15, cosine 45 degrees. For the imaginary, A imaginary, it's going to be 15 sine. 15 sine, which is opposite, which is imaginary. Yep, 45 degrees. Okay. For B, what color did you use? Green? B. For B, it's equal to 8, 180 degrees. 8 angle 120 degrees. Then, but keep in mind, we're not looking at the 120 degrees. We need to find this angle over here. This is the angle we are using to find the real or imaginary. Let me just double check because I believe it's going to be the same angle, but let me just double check. It will be, it's just signs is what is different. So, second. So yeah, لا تخربطوا روحكم, it's fine. You could just apply the actual angle from the positive. It's going to be just fine. Okay. Again, we're just going to find the B real, which is 8 cosine 45 degrees. Then, B imaginary is equal to 8 sine 45 degrees. Is it 45 degrees? No, sorry, 120 degrees. Excuse me. 120 degrees. Okay. And 120 degrees. And then part C, C is equal to 15 Newton angle 210. Okay, angle 210. So again, C real is equal to 15 cosine 210, and C imaginary is equal to 15 sine 210. Then, now that we got all of these components, we are going to add all the imaginary or all the real, add all real, and add all imaginary. You're done. So يكون عندنا 15 cosine 45 plus 8 cosine 120 plus 8 sine 120 15 cosine 210. هذا real component. What does this mean? We are adding all the components along the x-axis or the real axis عشان we find the value مال resultant. And then the same thing we will do with the imaginary. We're going to add all the imaginary, which in this case it's 15 sine 45. Can someone add all the reals for me in the calculator and give me the final answer? 15 sine 45 plus 8 sine 120 plus 15 sine 120 210. زين. So 15 sine 45 plus 8 sine 120 plus 15 sine 210. أنا طلع لي جواب الإيماجينري to be equal to 10.03. زين. والريل طلعني ما حد طلع لي جواب. زين. cosine minus 6a. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys. Minus 6.38. تمام. So we got these two values. طبعا these are newtons. Both are in newtons لأن the given في السؤال معطينا إياه in newtons. So now if you want to plot this, we are going to look at it this way. The real part of it is negative 6.38. So you're going to go into the negative zone and you will go تقريبا negative 6.38, which is خلوني بس أتأكد 15. إذا هذا 12 يعني قولوا هني تقريبا. زين. You will go this in the negative zone. This is the first component. And the second component is 10.003, which you will go vertically up. So you can say it is roughly up to here. Okay. And your final resultant force, أطلع لكم لون جديد ما أعرف من وين أجيبه أو خلوه أسود. The final resultant force is going to be the intersection between this and this. زين. So it's going to look something like this. This is your final resultant force. زين. R value ماله عنده وعنده طبعا بعد الثيتا value ماله اللي هو from here. زين. So how can you find these values? زين. أو بنقول هذا الانجل ماله. How can you find these values? These are your coordinates لا. This is your real and imaginary. Same concept as we did before. This is your real and imaginary. Now you need to find it in polar. So it's R is going to be equal to minus 6.38 squared plus 10.03 squared under the square root طبعا. This is going to be your magnitude. And your direction is theta is equal to tan inverse of opposite minus 6.38 over اللي هو imaginary يعني over this is real, so it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be 10.003 so 10.003 or 10.03 over 6.38 minus. So tan theta, can someone find the R value, what the R value is? $11.887. Thank you guys. 11.889 newtons. So this is our final magnitude and this is our final direction. But keep in mind, this is not an angle from here. And to هني هذا الانgle, the theta is this theta over here. This is the theta. This is the theta. Okay, so you're gonna have to add 180 to it. يعني بتسوون 180 minus 57.54 عشان تحصلون the actual angle from the positive x-axis. 180 minus 57.54, which is equal to 122.46 degrees, and that's the final answer. Okay, so because this is the angle, always remember it's the angle with the force forms or resultant forms with the x-axis. That's always the angle theta we're talking about. تمام. That's how you solve this question. نشوف بعد آخر سؤال نشوف. An aircraft P flying at constant height has a velocity of this. Another aircraft has the same height, has the velocity of this. Determine the velocity of P relative to Q and the velocity of Q relative to P. Simple. All you have to do is just literally subtract one from the other to determine it relative to the other one. فهني يقول لكم relative P to Q. إنزين. Just very quickly. Everything else you already know how to do. إنزين. So an aircraft P flying at a constant height has a velocity of V1 يساوي 400 plus 300 I أو J. أنا ما أحب أستخدم I. V2 is equal to 200 minus 600 I أو J. Then this is their speed. Determine relative velocity of P to Q. Velocity of P to Q. إنزين خلنا هذا نسميه عيل P عشان ما يصير خربطة. هذا P وهذا Q. كل اللي بتسوونه عشان you find relative velocity, the velocity of P relative to Q معناته P relative to Q. زين. Q minus P لأن you want P, the velocity of P relative to Q. Q هو الستاندرد مالكم. ف P relative to Q. Q relative to P. P minus Q. That's it. That's it. And they want it in polar form. تمام? Let me just double check if I did not do this بالعكس, but I am 90% sure this is how it is. Anyone has any other questions? هو العكس. هو العكس. So P minus Q هني وهني Q minus P. That's it. So the velocity of P relative to Q, you simply just put a minus. كذي يكون. زين. هني بعد Q minus P. This is part A, this is part B. That's it. And the rest يعني is very straightforward. All right. Any questions؟ كم واحد بعد عايش ويانا؟ ما حد بقى، كل حد طلع. Any questions? Yes, please ask. إن شاء الله عاد وضحت لكم شوي الموضوع يعني وسهلتها عليكم. تمام، ممتاز ممتاز. I will start uploading everything I did today إن شاء الله by